Can you say your names so we know each other?
Tony.
Victor.
Dave. Justin.
Tony. Simon.
Solveig.
Philip.
Terry.
Bob. You can kick it off.
Thank you. Very kind of you. We go through the old spiel again. Haven't had it for a while because I've been speaking too much. It is always pretty much the same. Well, how could it be anything else? If we're only talking about the one essence that's patterning, functioning, shaping and forming this manifestation we call a universe or a cosmos or a world. It's always the one. And you can't get anything simpler than one. But yet it's been divided up into all sorts of concepts, ideas and images throughout the word, the labels we put on things. Wait till these settle down and then have to start again. So, when I say I can't teach you anything, and I can't tell you anything, recognise that as actuality. All we do is point toward and ask you to look to where we're pointing to see for yourself. Hey, good, how are you?
George.
Yeah, no, George. See for yourself, because nobody can ever do it for you. Purely and simply, there is nobody. And the other way I put it as a rule, I'm not talking to anybody. I'm not talking to any mind. I'm not talking to that body-mind identity you think yourself to be. I'm talking about that sense of presence, the knowing that you are, that translates or expresses through the mind as the thought I am. Just to this, nothing else. Now that thought I am is just a label we put on that sense of presence. The same, what I use to try and describe it, same intelligence energy that's patterning, shaping, forming it as everything. And that is what expresses through the thinking as the thought I am. Now what's this thought I am? We take it to be me. But is there such a thing as me? We put that label on, the thought I am, representing this pattern you call the body-mind, but don't they call it in Hinduism, for instance, Sat Chit Ananda, Nama Rupa. Sat is existence, Chit is consciousness, Ananda is the love of a being, or the stillness, silence which it all appears in. And you can't postulate anything at all that could be outside of that screen of stillness and silence. What would it be in? Everything must be in that. And the other two factors they put on, it's called the five factors, are Nama Rupa. Sat Chit Ananda Nama Rupa. The Nama meaning name and the Rupa meaning form. Name and form. And they tell you clearly in them that the Nama Rupa are Maya. Illusion, appearance only. And they say it's a phenomenal manifestation. Look up your dictionary, look up the word phenomena. You see the word phenomena mean that which appears to be, that's its definition. So you, me and everything else in this are phenomenal appearances. The trees, the flowers, the earth, everything that's appearing in that space and silence. Everything. And that's what we know. We name things. But the things don't give us much of a description, much of an idea, so we put labels or words on the thing. That's a chair, that's a carpet. That is you, that is me, that is the tree, that is the flower, that is space. They're all things. And all appearing in that space-like awareness, the no thing. Can something come from no thing? You don't have to be a Rhodes Scholar to work that out. Something cannot come from nothing. So even though they're appearing as things, they are still no thing. You mightn't like that. That you are no thing as far as that body, mind, entity you believe yourself to be, the conceptual image. It tells you in the Bible, in the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, the Word was God. We lose sight of that. The Word was God. That's all God is a word. But see how many different labels they put on that term God. In some of the Hindu scriptures they have 1,000 names of Vishnu with a God. Buddhists have millions of names. All the other things will have different labels that don't. Labels to put on that God. But in the beginning was the Word. All God was in the Word. And have a look at that. If you ask yourself, when did I begin? You'll say, I began at birth. But can any one of you actually remember your birth? You can't remember your birth. You wouldn't know anything about it if you haven't seen other things coming into the world through eggs, through the womb, through seeds, through every other way. Since in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. There was nothing made without Him, without the Word. Nothing made that was made. All things were made by Him, by the Word. And isn't that what we've done? How many words were you born with? You weren't born with any words, and you don't remember your birth because you had no words. And you don't remember much about life until you learnt words at about the age of 2.5, when the capacity of reasoning developed in that form. And that's a capacity these human forms have, which is more developed than what it is in other birds, animals and insects, but they all have that capacity to a certain extent. So at about 2.5 you've learnt words. And look at that and realise that every word you've ever spoken or likely to speak has been learnt. You weren't born with it. It's been picked up along the way. And you're probably learning new words to this day. You look up your dictionary, you'll find new words, and forgetting old ones. But we've taken the word to be the real, taken it to be the thing. Well, have a look and investigate that and see if it is. Take the word water. Can you drink the word? Can you swim in the word? Will you drown in it? Can you wash in it? You can't. And what you're drinking, you're not drinking the word. You're drinking the liquid, the two gases, or whatever they were, chemicals that formed oxygen, hydrogen, that formed that liquid water. The same with the word fire. Does it burn your mouth if you speak it? Can you heat yourself with it? Can you cook with it? So when you look at this I or me, what is it? Well, you've got a conceptual image, I, and you put labels on it. It's me, Bob, the Australian, the good fellow, or the not so good, the one that's had a bad childhood, the one that's been abused, one that's not happy or depressed, or having a bad trot. All these words we've added onto that I. That word I am. You can't do much with the I am, so we add on words, concepts, ideas and images, and form a conceptual image about ourselves. And this is the image we call the reference point, the self-centre or the ego. All different names for the one thing. And look at it. Everything you've learned from it was always referred or related to that I or me. And it always implies there's a core or a centre in this beingness that's with what I am. Reference point, self-centre, and it is the ego. Because we put all these other labels on. I'm Bob, the Australian, a good fellow, blah, blah, blah. That is a conceptual image I've got about myself, which I call the ego. And everything becomes relative to that ego, to that reference point. That's all our problems are problems of relationship. All problems, not just a male-female relationship you're having a bad time with. All relationship, relative to. And we've got this believed in entity that's relating to all these other concepts, which is not separate from it, it's not apart from it, but it's taken itself to be. And relationship is duality, me and the other. And aren't all these ancient texts and scriptures, and they get loaded with a lot of other garbage, are pointing to the non-duality of everything. The one God, if you like to call it that, or the one essence that's patterning, shaping and forming and expressing as everything. But we're not. We take the separate entity and think there's more than one. Two. And so what do we do from that divided image, me? We think, well, I'll go out and follow some of those scriptures, read them, meditate on them, do this practice and that practice, and I will become enlightened or realised or liberated. And don't you realise that becoming, you've moved away from being? Satchitananda is being, knowing and loving to be. So becoming is a seeming movement away from being, a future, implying a future time. So there is no such thing as becoming. It's only the being. And that's where we get into the problem, because when we go on this search, we might search 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, and somewhere or other you don't seem to get anywhere. You might meditate, do this practice. Some hit on it naturally and pretty evidently. Do this practice and do this other, repeat this mantra and do other things. And it doesn't happen. And it won't happen because it can't happen. You can't make something that is fictitious, doesn't exist, into something that's begun to come on the whole. There is no separation or division in it at all. Never has been, never could be, or never will be. But it's the idea of separation that's the cause of all our problems, me and the other, me and the not me. So, looking in all this direction, you never found the answer. Mightn't it just dawn on you? We're not idiots, we're not dull or stupid, we're intelligent people. I've been doing this mantra consciously, and I've been reading this meditation consciously and earnestly and sincerely all this time. Think I'm getting close, but I've never found the answer. Mightn't it just dawn on you? Maybe I've been looking in the wrong direction. Simple as that. Where are you looking? You're looking in the mind to find the answer in the mind, when the mind is just an image, a conceptual image. Show me a mind if you think there's a mind. You say my mind, but what are you referring to? A group of concepts you've got based on past events, experience and conditioning, a dead image. And that's all that mind or thinking is, conceptualising. Thinking words, thoughts, ideas, images. The word's not the real. Is the image real? Look at those reflections in the mirror. They're all images in the mirror. Are they real? You can't say they're not there, but go up to the mirror and try and grab a reflection out of it. Can't say they are there. And when you're looking maybe in your look in the wrong direction, wouldn't you ask yourself, well, what direction can I look in? Because every direction I look in will always be in the mind. And he's saying the answer's not in the mind. Is he right or is he wrong? Well, where would I look then? Wouldn't I just pause the thought for a while, the mind for a while, or try and pause? And you can't do that either. But in the earnestness of seeing, you'll try and look what's beyond these thoughts. See if you can find a spot or a centre anywhere you can say this is where it all began. And in that stillness and silence, which you're trying to reach through your meditation and all the rest, you might get periods of it. When it's a me trying to become silent and still, it's not good. If it happens of itself, And it has happened in many cases with all of you. You've all had taste of it. You realise you're on the right track then. Because things start to fall into place naturally and effortlessly. Now, it doesn't mean to say that we're going to stop thinking. Thinking is a very useful instrument. It's not the enemy. But it is the cause of all our problem when it's not understood, not recognised for what it is. It is the cause, and that's all that so-called karma is cause and effect. And you realise that me, the belief in the me, is the cause of all my psychological problems. And the effects are the anxiety, the stress, the guilt, the shame, remorse, the unhappiness, despair, anger, fear. They're results of the cause me, relating to this belief in me. And ask yourself this, the simple question, can there be an effect if it's not being related to a cause? Well, work it out for yourself. You realise there can't be any effect if it's not relating to some cause. What are you going to refer it to if you haven't got the seeming stopper or the cause to rectify it? It's not going to stay there even. What thought can stay there if it's not related to the entity? And notice your thoughts, they're always moving on. There's no thought fixated in your head, just the same. Look out in nature, there's no cloud fixated over the sun or in the sky. Clouds are constantly moving. And have a look at it. Where are yesterday's thoughts now? Where are the thoughts you had last year or two or 3 years ago? You can recall them, but they're not there unless you recall them. And the only reality you're giving is when you recall them in this moment, because there's no one in this room who could remember what you said a minute ago now unless you're recalling it. You've got to bring it back to mind. It's gone. And in the future, you've got to anticipate and imagine what you're going to do. And that's the only future you've got. So they call it this immediacy or this nowness. And they'll tell you you've got to try and stay in the now. I'll say, try and get out of it. Because is anyone who's not in this room right now is not aware of presence right now, not the future. You can be imagining a future or recalling the past. But what is your actual awareness? Isn't it an awareness right here and right now I am, and I don't even have to put that word on it. I can't negate it. It's natural. That's what we're pointing out. Well, I can go on forever, but you don't want to hear me, so we'll put Kath on for a while. She can explain it in different ways. It's easily explainable when you look into it and recognise it. Recognise. The Buddha called it a cognising emptiness. Not that we are cognising emptiness, but the emptiness has that capacity of cognising, or in other words, the cognising is knowing. All that knowingness is appearing in the emptiness. And he made the statement then that emptiness is form. It's that cognising emptiness that's vibrating into all these pattern shapes and forms, you, me and everything else in this manifestation. And then he turned around and said, look at that, he said, in the form, though it's appearing as though it can be nothing other than the emptiness. So emptiness and form are one and the same thing, nothingness. And you are that. Go on.
Okay. So he said it all, really. I mean, yeah, if we start from anywhere, any pointer, the emptiness is form, or the silence vibrates into the sound, or the space or emptiness vibrates into forms, or stillness vibrates into movement, then we basically just bring back the whole manifestation into the one essence. So it's that one essence that vibrates into various different forms and shapes. So that is where the idea of non-separation comes from. Because that one essence can only separate itself into different forms seemingly. So it is only seemingly, it's like waves are not separated from the ocean. They seem to be separated from each other, but only seemingly, because they're still an expression of the same water. So all that we are encountering there in the manifestation, including the past and future, which are thoughts, forms that are whatever, the trees, the bodies, the subtle sounds, like thoughts again, or different waves, like light waves, sound waves, X-rays, or all the other. So that basically explains non-duality in a very plain words, one without the second. This is just one essence that is appearing as everything. And that one essence is to be recognized and verified, and it can be done experientially. Like the moment we are not labeling anything in the world, we don't label ourselves as the other, as separate. The experience that we can relate to as personal present experience, it would be the experience of being. And this is again when it often gets complicated, because some of the pointers will tell you that, no, me is a fiction, me is a phantom, it doesn't exist. And then the other pointers will tell you that I am is that I am is the only truth, I am is the light, I am is the way, I am is the truth, like Jesus said. So it seems like there is a contradiction here, because we can only use the words that belong to dualistic mind. So what is and what isn't the fiction? And of course, Bob can give you the answer, or I can give you the answer. But the easiest way that is always easily verifiable, and you can come back to finding the answer for yourself. Like, what is it that never changes, that is always there? Which I am is a phantom or myth or the bundle of thoughts, conceptual image, ego, and which one is the primary awareness of presence? And then the distinction is pretty easy, because even in the description there is the prescription. When I'm saying the conceptual image, I'm already kind of giving away the answer. Everything that can be thought, conceived in the mind, and observed as the selected out of the reality as separate object, or conceived or perceived as separate object, will be the seemingly so, will be the illusion, the maya, will be the appearance. So that will be a phenomena. And what is the reality is the underlying base, changeless screen. And it's not a thing. When I say screen, it doesn't mean that there is an object there that could be known. The screen of awareness, or the knowingness. We cannot know the knowingness, because knowingness is the activity of knowing. I am knowing about the sounds, and I cannot know about my knowing, because this is the very activity of what I am. So basically the awareness of being, awareness of presence, or knowing that we are, is the base, is the I am, that when the mind translates it as the I am, is the one that cannot be denied. And you don't have to believe anyone when they tell you this. Just try and not be. See how successful you are in not being, or in not being aware. It's not even imaginable, it's unthinkable. So the awareness of presence of being is completely undeniable. It's there always. Now, when I leave that base of the being and go to the head and want to adorn it, or want to kind of make it a thing, a substance, I will say the being, I am the body mind, or I am the whatever, the soul, or I am whatever. That is already a limitation. That is already a conceptual image closing down that infinite space of presence awareness. So without the concept, like Bob mentioned, non-conceptual awareness, the awareness without the conceptual limitations that I encapsulate myself in, is totally timeless, spaceless, always here, undeniable, and it's just no place like home. It is something that, regardless of what is going on in the imagination, it is a place that I can always breathe out and rest. That's the safe place in which, in non-conceptual awareness, there is no fear. because to experience fear, I need the label. I need to put whatever the emotion, whatever the movement of energy, of vibration is happening in this present moment. If I don't go to the head and call it something, call it fear or call it anxiety or call it whatever, I can have more elaborate story, like what is going to happen if I lose my job. That's even more of a story. But without any concepts, the present sensation, present experiencing of the aliveness of the being is always there, is always here, is timelessly there. There is no time when we don't really experience it. So this is the start point. The whole beautiful spiel and the pointers in non-duality, they are often taken through the mind, and they promise us some sort of an imaginary state which we can achieve. That's not what non-duality is really promising, but that's how often we can hear it, because I used to hear it this way also. I used to hear that, oh, I will at some point liberate myself from the suffering. That is never going to happen. The I that is experiencing the suffering can never ever be liberated. It will suffer forever until it dissolves into the suffering, because this I is a fiction. So how the fiction can achieve enlightenment, how a fiction can get liberated from anything or can add anything. So that what I was waiting for liberation from suffering, waiting for the state in which I'll be in love constantly, in a bliss constantly. What I understood myself to be, getting that thing added to myself. That is never going to happen. That's impossible. Because that I was believing myself, this was more kind of an emotional I. The I that was vulnerable, the I that was fragile, the I that was unworthy and was suffering. And that I wanted a relief and, of course, endless pleasure. Like, who wouldn't want a pleasure? So that's sort of a pull towards desire, fulfilling desire, having this final dream of enlightenment, which is just the quintessence of all pleasures in the world. That is all activity in the mind. That is all concepts. That's a dream. That's imagination. Now, to wake up from that imagination is to drop off, pause the thought for a moment, like Bob says, and just rest in this uncontrived singularity of basic, simple I am, the knowing of presence. And now, from here, see if there is any I, any ego, or any image that you could postulate or you could experience without the concepts. Like, is there anyone here who is whatever, vulnerable or unworthy, unless I think about it? There may be a vibration going on, like contraction or something. But if I don't have the label for this vibration, I can't even call it unworthiness. I can't. It's just the life expressing itself as the vibration. So if I sit with that vibration without labeling it, the one basic thing that I will notice, and that's about everything in the whole appearance, is the change. It is not going to last. It feels like, because that's what the story tells me, it feels like I was experiencing that sort of a contraction and a slight sense of unworthiness for nearly 40 years. But that's not true. If I'm awake moment to moment to whatever the content of experience is, I know it wasn't there all the time. There are moments when we are just eating food and we taste the food. There are moments when we are looking at the beauty and we are just... and there is no construct watching the beauty. It's just this moment, beautiful moment, or moments when we are in love. The experiencing, the content of experience, the frequency of the vibration, the frequency of the emotion is changing all the time. The idea that there is something solid called me or I that is constantly suffering is just a thought in the head. So to wake up from this thought, because ultimately the I, this construct made of thoughts, will never achieve anything, will never find the peace, will never get the rest, will never find a state of pleasure and liberate themselves. No, we can only, we the consciousness, we the life, can wake up from that dream of being this constructed individual or whatever. So the awakening is basically from the idea of being separate self. That separate self that wants something, that desires something. The moment waking up from separate desiring pleasure self happens, desires may still show up. Like, the cats, they don't have sense of separation, the ego, and they still meowing when they want a fresh beef or something. The functioning is including that we are attracted to certain colors or certain smells or certain sounds, and we are repulsed from the other. That's the part of the makeup of every form, every pattern, and that's beautiful. So waking up from the sense of being limited individual to the understanding that life is just presenting a content. And I'm the screen in which the content happens. So if the content is this type of vibration, labeled in the past as fear, now just being interested about whatever the life wants to experience. If the life experiences this particular vibration, okay, there's no resistance towards it. If there is no I who wants, no, this one is bad, I want something more pleasurable. If there is no overlay on that present moment of the comparison with the past and wanting something else, something different, there is no resistance. The sense of the life, first of all, it gets much, much easier. And the suffering is not called suffering anymore. It's just pleasure, pain, or discomfort, even not labeling it that badly. But it's just the content. It's like the content is always vibrating dualistically. Doesn't mean that Bob doesn't experience night, day, night, pleasure, pain, happiness, sadness, but he is not. They are appearing on the screen of awareness, but there is nobody who owns that. That is my night or my day, my pleasure or my pain. So they're just floating through the screen like clouds. And then there is no clinging. And even if there is a clinging, that clinging is part of the cloud. It's just another cloud. Like nothing really from this perspective is ever personal. Nothing can really hurt you when you know that you are just the space in which you allow the world to be as it is. It's not even a process of allowing, because there is nobody really to allow it or to deny it or to do anything about it. It's just basically awareness is awareing, the knowingness of whatever it is. So this has to be verified. It cannot be taught. It cannot be imitated. It cannot be emulated. It has to be experienced, verified. The fact that the image, the conceptual image, the sense of contraction that we were brought up and conditioned to believe ourselves to be is just a conceptual image, it's just a thought. It doesn't exist in the absence of thinking. And it is constantly changing because thoughts are changing. So it's not true, it's not a reality. So realizing it's not a reality, we can just see it coming and going as the clouds and not be too bothered about it. So that's about it. Do you want to add something? I'll put it on.
Don't put it on, I'm not going to be that long.
Oh, you never know. I'll take it off.
Point out how it works. Something comes up, and it's generally an old memory, or even something new, or you sense you like it. And you want more of the stuff. Realising, like in nature, the pairs of opposites are constant vibrating. It's day, night, winter, summer, silence, sound, movement, stillness. The good things come up and we want to hang on to the good things, don't we? I like it. Not realising that whether you like it or not, it's going to move on. No matter how much you love them, how much you want to care for them, they're going to move on. Because the manifestation is transient, constantly changing. Just the same as the body you walked into this room with this morning is not the same body you got now. There are cells dying at right at this moment. Not one or two, but thousands of them, and being replaced. And you know that, because you know haven't got the same body you had 20 years ago when you were still saying, I am then, and believing yourself to be that body mind. But it's not the same body. Every cell in it has changed. So if something comes up and I like it, we don't want these good things to go. We want to hang on. We don't want to see the bad. When the bad comes up, we try to. So what do? We try to keep it there. As I say, not realising that it's transient, whether you want to keep it there or not, no matter how much you try, it's going to move on. It's going to change. We don't want it to go, so what do? We resist it. We try very hard. It's this image we think we are. All the energy goes into the idea that it's going to alter, modify or correct or change things. But it doesn't happen. Because don't you realise that any resistance you are in conflict. You are in conflict with that thing, trying to keep it there. You're in conflict trying to stop it from going. And any conflict you are in makes you unhappy. You don't want to be in conflict. It makes you anxious. Makes you fearful, depressed, guilty. So the conflict is your psychological suffering. What about the other way? Something comes up again in the constant change and you don't like this one. What do? All the chatter that's going on that we don't want, we try to get rid of it. Or all the arguments and all the fear, or meeting this one or doing whatever it is that you don't like, you try to get rid of it. Not realising if it's left as it is, it's going to change sooner or later, but again, as we try to hang on to the thing, we try and force this one out. Now, any trying to force it out, you're in resistance again, aren't you? Resisting it. You're not sitting there naturally letting it be, you're resisting it. It's the same as the other way, you're resisting it, trying to keep it there. And again in conflict. Again in uneasiness. So that's all that's going on all the time, is resistance, conflict and disease. What happens if you haven't got this conceptual image, this ego to relate to? What's going to resist it? What concept, if you haven't got a concept, is going to resist it then? Isn't going to be left as it is? And if you recognise it and look at this thing, knowing full well the cloud doesn't stay in the sky, it's left as it is. And it moves on. And look back on your thoughts and your feelings, emotions, and realise left. Even though while you're resisting, and only resistance went on for a certain amount of time, they soon change. Eventually they change. They can be recalled and resisted again. But leaving it as it is, you're allowing nature to take its course. Right at this moment, the earth rolling around the sun. Who's doing it? Anyone in this room? Or is the sun doing it itself? Or is the earth doing it? Just the gravity and the pull of the tide or whatever, the whole of the cosmos is in about that. And just the same, who's breathing you right now? Who's beating your heart? Who's growing your fingernails and digesting your food? If you say, I am, you've had your minds away from it for a long time, it hasn't been going on without that me doing it. So you see, that's basically all that's happening. Relating to this self-centre, the dualistic appearance or idea, is going to be a problem. And all our problems come about from that relationship or duality. But there is absolutely no duality in non-duality, though it appears to be so. And you couldn't discriminate or distinguish anything if it didn't appear to be so. The appearance is necessary to the function, but the belief that it is a fact, that it has some power and independent nature of itself, is the problem. And the belief that we're relating to this me, or image, that has some power, mind power or thought power or whatever other power. But realise there is only one power in the universe. That's the omnipresence, total presence, omnipotence, total power, and omniscience, total intelligence. Seemingly expressing as three things, but they're not three things, three aspects of the one. Just like steam, water and ice, the three aspects of H2O. So check these things out and see for yourself. Have anybody got any questions or arguments or what are we going to do? Away you go.
And it's another thing Bob usually asks at the end. Anybody has questions or arguments? Or tell us your version. Like, is there anything that actually completely resonates and strikes home in what he says or what whoever says, or even in your own experience? Because saying it out loud can actually help people, and we have few people from around the world who are listening with us. And those people that it is going to help is always just another version of you as life. So yeah, share whatever works with you too, because that also reinforces it. It's not many places in the world where non-duality is spoken this way, that anyone has a say. And it does really reinforce the understanding.
I'm enjoying, Bob, what you said about the earth. You know, who's doing the earth? You know, who's doing that? Or who's doing the sun? And it reminds, it's very much like after hearing you say it for many years, eventually I heard you say, nature doesn't have a centre. I thought, oh my God, that's great. But I'd never heard it for 10 years, you know, when you're saying it. And yes, and who's doing it? Who's doing it? And that's, yeah, it's just it's a nice thing, yeah. But, you know, the second sentence you said today, Bob, was, it couldn't be anything else, you know. And I suppose that's what the person thinks, that there's always something else, you know. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Something more to discover, find.
That's
to
right.
add.
Yeah. I remember Bob said, you can't get out of now, you know. Oh, yeah, sure, yeah. But
I can't stop trying.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And of course, that nobody's doing it goes all the way down to everything, doesn't it? The blood going around our bodies now, our breathing. You know, we never, this power that you were just recently talking about. Yeah, we don't see it, and it's just the one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an important one too.
And a hello to Bill, by the way, up at Bermagui. Okay, so it's not too bright. Okay.
When someone's going through, say, addiction, and then they're having withdrawals, and there's that real sense that they can't get that pleasure anymore, you know, they can't get the drug anymore, whatever that addiction may be. There's a sense of, obviously, of desperation and hopelessness, and who's the sufferer there?
Yeah.
Still the same self-centered.
More so.
More so, yes,
More so,
absolutely.
and you want the drug.
Yeah.
You can't get the drug.
Yeah, well, the concept is that we can't live without it. And the idea, seemingly addicted.
So you've got to give up the drug.
You can't do anything. You're not the doer.
It's the word that we're addicted to. That's the split. It's just word, you know. We talk about non-duality, and we're in a room here with people trying to find out what non-duality is. And it gets pointed at and pointed at and pointed at, you know. What it is, and certainly what it isn't, you know. And I love that thing that Bob talks about, you know, in the beginning was the word. And my beginning as a personal entity came into being when I started to learn words. And prior to that, there was no split because there was no word. You know, and you know, like, seeing that is so important, and it's so goddamn simple to actually investigate that for oneself, so that you're not sitting in a room like this being hand-fed stuff, which we then take into the head and we lock it away in a certain place and hang on to it as another conceptual idea. You know, this is really, really simple, so simple. All my whole construct as a personal entity, all of it is based on the belief or addiction to word. Who would I be? What would I be without no thoughts? Who would I be without word? It's almost like a fearful state comes over us. What would I be without a thought? You know? But you can investigate that for yourself. You know, the very first word that was thrust on me was my name, Terry. And I didn't have any choice in that. You know, and then the rest of the dialogue that gets thrust onto us when we're children growing up, you know. Bob often says you're a good boy, you're a bad boy, whatever, you know.
Mhm.
But if you really, really investigate it for yourself and try and find this sense of me, what actually is it? And it gets there's tips and hints all the time. Pause a thought. You know, not that we can pause a thought, but it's a pointer. Yeah? If there was no thought, would me be? Would I even exist at all if there was no thought? Now, that's the trick. There would be existence, absolutely, but no me. Without the thought. And it's conditioned into all of us as we grow up. Yes, Simon.
But when the drug addict is having a withdrawal, it's happening in his body, the chemical reactions. He's not even thinking of his thoughts. His thoughts are crazy.
There's no his body, Simon.
It seems that
Seems,
chemical reactions.
But there's no his body, and it's not happening to anybody.
The suffering seems to be in the body.
What I'm trying to do today, for whatever reason, is make it real simple. It's all about words.
So you go back there.
Yeah. But go back to your supposed self. Where does the self,
Labels.
yeah, why do I think I exist? Why do I think that there's a me and another? Why do I think there's me here that suffers from my own thoughts? Why do I think that there's me here that suffers from physical addiction that's going on in the body? I'm not saying that there's not an action, that there's not a thing that's happening in the body, but there's no person there that it's happening to. It's only when the person takes ownership of that the conceptual person suffers. And it's purely conceptual.
Chemical reactions.
The person is conceptual.
If you didn't have any resistance towards the chemical reaction, like let's say if that wasn't a reaction coming from the withdrawal syndrome or something, but it was basically just broken legs or something, there is also pain, there is also chemical reactions in the body, but there is no me who is saying, oh, it shouldn't have happened. Because there is really, if there is suffering. But if there isn't, if you look at the animals, how they actually deal with any sort of a situation that would be uncomfortable or even threatening for the body. They actually, if there is pain, and it could be, the chemicals could be really uncomfortable. You can have sweats or whatever, I don't really know that much about withdrawal, but I assume that will be a lot of things. But if there is no concept that it should be different, if there is no label that this is really bad, I have to stop it, and if there is no idea that I have to keep struggling, otherwise I will take that cigarette or I would go for that sex or shopping addiction or whatever it is. See how the majority of the suffering, if not all of it, comes from the idea that there is me who is trying to stay faithful to my decision and trying not to fall for it again, and suffering because how long is that going to take? Am I going to be able to go through it? Or is it really, why me? Or, all that stuff is really resistance coming from the comparison with the situation with no addiction. It's a mental processes on top of the chemical reaction. See, chemical reaction, it is funny, I actually heard the example in a psychology that someone had butterflies in the stomach. when the butterflies in the stomach happened before the important exam, it was labeled as an anxiety. And it was wired in the brain to see that it's exactly same chemicals, neurons flashing in that case when there was an exam or something. And of course it was labeled as anxiety, horrible emotion, and it contracted and it created the mental response to the chemical, created incapability of even passing the exam. An exam wasn't passed. And the same reaction, the very same reaction, happened when that person was meeting the girlfriend and getting excited about it. And now this same butterflies were labeled as excitement, and it was labeled as, oh my god, I can't wait. And of course it enhanced the performance. It kind of brought the surge of the energy into completely different level. The reactions in the body are completely impersonal. The brain, the mind, the past history, the conditioning, the patterns make meaning of it. Now, if you assume the meaning, assign the meaning to that butterflies or to that cortisol running or whatever it is, that it is something wrong, and this is something that will last forever, and this is something that you can't take anymore, the suffering will be incredible. But if you don't label it as such, or you label it as something, oh yeah, gosh, I've been through worse things in my life, it's not so bad, it's just a vibration, or you're just simply curious about it, without giving it any meaning whatsoever. Just see how this body is trying to bring the system back to balance. And it may be uncomfortable because addiction is actually, it's a challenging situation, of course. But this discomfort is actually a healing in action. Having curiosity about it, you could actually enjoy it. You could feel grateful for the process. You could be curious, just basically, instead of taking it personally and making it worse and making it a story and fearing that it's going to get worse or it's going to last forever. Just be the screen for it. Be the completely neutral presence in which that process is happening and is allowed to happen. It's not being suppressed, it's not being medicated, it's not being resisted, it's just welcomed. It's not an easy thing, but it's doable.
You were talking about when Bob had his hip replaced and he was screaming in pain.
Yeah.
Now, if you didn't have morphine, how would you have coped, Bob? You know, if that pain just, you had morphine and that relieved it.
I don't remember screaming.
All right.
The screaming was only when they were shifting him or moving him off the bed, and that screaming was pure intelligence of the body, because the pain, when it becomes unbearable, it say, watch out, be careful, don't break it, So screaming has function.
What does the morphine do? It rocks the mind off, doesn't it?
Who knows? But when
Didn't it? Just a minute.
So
let him answer.
I say, when you take that drug, what does it do?
it reduces pain. So
Well, how?
I don't know.
It blocks the neurons, the receptors.
Okay.
Blocks. So the body's getting on all right with the neurons when it's not coming into the mind described as pain or this, that, the other. And if if you're unconscious for a while, the body doesn't the body continue to heal?
And same with animals. You see, the animals are not given morphine quite often. And when the pain, I've heard Bob saying it many times,
So
this system
why
is
would you have
brilliant.
morphine then?
Well, because it is available. And if it wasn't available, then we would, approach the situation from the moment, like speculating what would be if. It's precisely going back to the mind and analyzing what would happen.
So
The body probably would be unconscious for more time.
who knows? Yes.
What's your point?
What's my point?
Yeah.
If you've got an addiction and your body's just, you feel like it's not coping, well, often they'll give you other medication to settle you down, and then the pain or the anxiety will disappear. So we've got all these compounds to be used, and I'm worried if I get unbearable pain, at some point, I,
There you
you know,
go.
jump off a cliff.
There you go.
perhaps.
Yeah.
You're now worried about when you get unbearable pain. It might never happen.
Maybe.
You're already gone into the conceptualisation and imagining of it.
Yes.
And it will be more horrific than what it would normally be when it comes about because you've got all this preconceived idea.
Doesn't suffering can help you realise that you're actually not the suffering?
That's a good
Well,
point.
yeah.
Yeah, expand on it.
Yeah, I've
Yeah,
I've
let him
experienced
expand
that.
on it.
Well, if you
Sorry.
experience suffering, you can't be the suffering.
Yeah, you the knowing of it.
well,
I mean, the
yeah, I've experienced that.
Yeah,
severe cramps.
severe pain.
And other
Yeah,
times,
of course. Yeah.
when I'm a bit tighter, I just can't cope with them. I have
There's
to
only
get
two
up
ways to
and
cope
move.
with it. Not resist it. Not resist it and say, it's not me, I can't do anything about this, so you've got to take it. Or the other way is to go right into it and say, what does this pain feel like? What's it like? It won't lessen it'll lessen the pain to become bearable, but it won't be unbearable.
Well, I've experienced quite a bit
Yeah.
of pain, and sometimes, you know, I can see it as, you know, not me,
Yeah.
and then it disappears. But other times, I try to do that, you know, or whatever, using words, and so with cramps, you can get up and run or move, and they usually go. But if that was going to be there was nothing, you know, I'd cut my throat or do something if that pain was with me for,
Yeah.
you know, a day.
But when the pain's like Bob's hip pain or any sort of intense pain, and there's no way out of it except maybe morphine to lessen it,
Yeah.
but he's still, you know, he's still conscious of the pain. So obviously you're not the pain,
Yeah,
you know,
but sometimes.
but the body's in pain
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
mind's in pain if it
sometimes
tries to
it's
resist
shocking.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes it worse. It makes the pain worse if you try to resist it. But that's why you have to let go in that emptiness, in that.
Mm.
In that
Well, I've had some pains where I just can't let go, but that
Yeah.
might be lack of experience. You know,
But
still believing in me.
What Bob said, I think it was crucial, and I hope you will really hear it because I'm gonna repeat it. See, because you are worried and you don't want to experience pain, you spend your time throughout the day and throughout the meeting right now to imagine what would you do if the pain happens and how to avoid it in future. What happens, not only as Bob mentioned, that you are actually reinforcing, you're dying of fear right now, like not necessarily, the moment is totally safe, but other thing is happening which is even worse. You are strengthening a habit. You're creating this neuronal connection that becomes a highway, that the neurons will be flashing this way all the time. What about future? What about pain? You're basically training yourself to actually be even more anxious and fearful in future. And you're not doing it. This is just a habit pattern happening. But if you recognize that habit pattern happening, if you wake up and see, this is the mental activity strengthening the fear for future going on. If you actually step back and recognize that habit pattern, it's not going to be that strong anymore. It's not going to be that unconscious anymore. And it eventually may even break because the fuel that was, the life essence that was going in that pattern now is taken away and is really here on the screen watching it. So the pattern is actually starved. You don't put fuel on the fire. Whilst while you engage in the pattern, and I see the intention, this is the loving to be, this is self-care. Of course you want to be safe, of course you don't want to pain. Recognize the love underlying that fear, that worry. It's beautiful, it's to be totally appreciated. But also the byproduct of it, of that loving thought, is that the habit pattern of future, and not only strengthening habit pattern, missing out on this moment as it is. See, there are sounds going on in this moment. There are different, facial expressions with people. There is an energy moving here in this moment. There is a lot happening. Your body is actually having some sensations that they are all completely, starved. The attention they are not even noticed. Because the persistent thought and a fear, because of the survival instinct, is probably one of the most powerful distractions from what is from this present moment. So it is actually a beautiful thing to recognize the pattern that is not only rehearsed and trained and strengthened, but also pattern that disables you from being completely fully here now. And again, and the underlying love of the pattern. So it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be asking these questions if they come up, please. Yeah. But it's just the whole picture, you know, not only what if, but
sometimes I find the thought of the experience intense pain exciting, so I can step back and accept it.
imagine a freedom. Freedom is freedom from future, from fear of pain. Freedom is really about just this, without any sort of distraction from what is. And yes, you will die one day, probably. I mean, the body will, you won't. And yeah, you probably will experience another day, another night, another pleasure, another pain. Yeah, that's part of the game. But imagine completely not fearing it.
Well,
not even looking forward
worried.
either way.
No, I'm not very worried.
Yeah,
No.
cool. Yeah, you don't really feel worried.
No.
But yeah.
Good.
So the essence, so life is living as it is, separate to what I tell myself about it, separate to what I imagine.
Your
Yes.
imagination is part of
Right.
expression of life.
Right.
Yeah, but see, on the basic level, there is hearing, seeing, tasting, touching, smelling. And that's also, all of it is life. Every wave is life. Wave of thinking, a wave of imagination is also life. But it kind of is fascinating. We were talking about it yesterday with Bob, just lightly, how beautiful it is that, you know, you look at life and it feels like there is, you know, when Bob is saying about the little child learning words and then learning to imagine, learning to create that conceptual reality for itself. If you look in a broader, like, you know, you put in the history of evolution on Earth, you have the creatures that are getting a little bit straightened up, and they're getting bigger brain, and they start imitating signals and creating thoughts and creating culture and societies and civilizations. And they completely, you know, like the threshold in which the thinking conceptual mind has appeared in these human creatures and imagination has appeared. From the perspective of life, how much more ways of expression the life, the emptiness, the space has gained in this moment. Now it not only expresses as the sounds, taste, touch, smells and balance and everything through multitude points in consciousness that can actually witness the dance, but it can also superimpose completely different universe on it, on top of it. Every thought of yours is a different universe. It creates different continents, countries, galaxies, everything. Suddenly, so many more ways of expression for that life. You are that life. So you, as that life, express as the body, as the imagination, as everything. So now the thoughts are wonderful from this perspective. Of course, if you completely forget yourself as life and travel on that painful thoughts, well, that's life too. But that may be not very wonderful for a moment.
I suppose I say that because of what happened to me recently, where I was just getting consumed completely to a point where I wasn't in touch with anything other than the pull of the thought, and imagining getting completely lost in it and dying.
Yeah.
And losing my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's helpful for me to then get in touch with my body, experience the sounds, to bring me back into...
Like a primary level of the dream. Don't go to the secondary levels, the imaginary levels.
Yeah.
Yes, you can always, this is the present moment, this is the idea of present moment. You can only hear the sounds in the present moment. You can only taste the tastes and touch the body, experience it only here now. Imagination, and that's what the other part of our conversation was. It seems like there was a process, you know, the baby learning words, creating images, or the evolution creating humans, creating thinking. But the time is part of the thoughts, is also conceptual. That's the beauty of it. There is no time. In this moment, the whole past is being created. It's only this moment. The million years or eons of evolution, the childhood, everything right now. So to actually understand thoughts for what they are, all you are left is this moment. You don't need the time. You don't need to learn anything. There is no time. So going back to this primary layer of the dream, because that's still the dream. Seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling, that's still appearance. That's still the waves of the ocean. But this one there is no suffering in it. In that basic being, basic experiencing of the present moment, they are, of course, pleasure, pain, and all that stuff, day, night. But there is no suffering. There is no resistance. Suffering only comes from resistance to what is, from thinking.
What Terry was saying about being addicted to the word.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, the word. The word, I sometimes feel, is conscious suffering. But there's also an unconscious suffering, because sometimes I think that the word is simply an evolution of maybe an impulse, and maybe a sensation, which turns into an emotion, and then which turns maybe into a word and a concept. So in some ways the suffering can be subconscious and unconscious as well. And I think the word is just a manifestation of that suffering. And then the awareness is the layer of maybe the light, or the awareness which separates us from that suffering, or that, you know, the realization that we're not that suffering. So I suppose I'm just saying that the word is part of that
Expression.
evolution, or that expression, and and ultimately it's about the light being able to contain and hold the darkness, and the two together, you know. So
Totally. What you say is totally correct. It's only the difference. Sometimes the suffering is used, the definition of the word suffering is used in the way that suffering is conceptual resistance towards what's happening. So if you want to use that word in the meaning that you gave it, you're totally correct. There is no distinction, you know, that of course there is subconscious, the resistance can completely be beyond words, and the resistance is not a suffering just yet, because, you know, even resisting the rain when you crawl down is not a suffering yet. So it all comes down to how precisely we defined the word, but you get the essence, so that's it.
And the word can take us into the silence as well. And,
absolutely.
I mean, that beautiful passage in the Bible, in the beginning, as it was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever. I mean, that's just beautiful in a nutshell.
Yeah.
It's obvious we're all scared of suffering.
Yeah.
Bob, are you a body-mind?
I can imagine I am. That's imagination. There's imaging in. You're creating mental or conceptual images and taking the images to be real.
And that's what we've been doing here, talking about the body-mind. Imagining suffering and how it's going to affect us, and blah, blah, blah.
Bingo.
Just a big story.
Bingo.
Big, huge story.
Yes.
Like a huge story.
I mean,
Is it about suffering, or is it about the lack of light, or the lack of awareness? And if
Just a bit.
that awareness was there, then suffering was not an issue.
Well, if you are awareness, there's no lack. You're aware.
You're aware of suffering, you're aware of love, and all the emotions, all the stuff that goes on, you're aware of it. You're aware of the three states: wake, sleep, dream. You're aware of it. Just stay there. Don't go off into thoughts and suffering. You're going to suffer. The body, because the body's here, you're going to suffer. Of course you're going to suffer. There's no way out of it. Duality, this is duality, so it will happen. You will suffer. We all suffered. We've all suffered. Mentally, physically, we've suffered. But once you realise the self, you realise it's actually just another appearance. I mean, painful as it is. Yeah. Mental suffering is almost as bad.
Can I just clarify something too, Tess? When I was saying we're addicted to the word, okay? If you're not careful with that, that implies that there's somebody here that's addicted to the word. But the reality is, and this will sound really strange, but it's truth, is it's word that is addicted to word.
Yep.
Full stop.
Yep.
There is no entity. It's all word.
Yep.
It's all concepts. It's all, there's this supposed entity here, which is total fabrication, absolute fabrication. We take the word to be the real. I exist because I say me is here. Me. And that's just a word and that's just a sound. But we're so conditioned to believe in the stories, the concepts, and the word, and what words mean, we don't know anything else. We literally don't know anything else. That's you know, whatever it is that happens here, Kat touched on it, is my whole universe. It's my whole world, whatever it is that's going on in me in thought. But you've got a whole world and a whole universe going on in you too. And
which is why it was helpful when Bob before also the pointer about the sun got me as well. It was like, yeah, it got through. It was like I have nothing to, I mean, I'm not, that's the same essence. That same source is revolving here.
Yeah.
And what I tell myself, I suppose in some way has me thinking I'm separate from that and doesn't have that flowing openly and freely, fully in this manifestation, in this moment.
And that's because we take the word to be what I am.
Yeah.
And it's simply not.
Yeah.
It's simply not. It's false. It's false information that we're running on. It's a false belief system that we're running on. And the only way that can be seen is to investigate for yourself. Wouldn't matter what I said.
And that happens through suffering because it's got to be like I'm so attached to those beliefs. So when they're coming up and they're dying, they're dying, and so they don't want to die.
Yeah, that can be.
But
that's
been my experience very recently.
Absolutely, and that can be part of the process, but it doesn't have to be that either.
Yeah, right.
It's not, you know.
Yeah, I'm not saying it has to be.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, last week we spent a bit of time talking about words, and we've done it again this week, and it's great. Often in these sort of meetings, people talk about thoughts, you know, thoughts. Mm-hmm. But I just found the talk of words a little bit more concrete, a little bit more...
it's more direct.
Yeah, more direct. Yeah, it's great.
It's a little bit more direct.
It's been really enjoyable.
I love your thing of a word addicted to word. I'm going to think about that one for a while.
It's word addicted to word.
Yeah.
It totally is.
Yeah. It's that chain. It's that chain of words.
Yeah. Or another way of looking at it, it's a pattern of thoughts addicted to a pattern of thoughts.
Yeah.
It is. It totally is. Because there isn't an entity that can either like or dislike thoughts, or there isn't an entity that's addicted or not addicted to thoughts. The whole entity is based on thoughts or word. Just word. And word is just a sound that we've given a meaning to.
Bob wanted
And
to
then-
add
and then-
something.
and then-
The vibration is just a movement of energy.
And then the concept is built on that. Sound, word, and then a concept around that. And then somewhere in amongst all that, me is. Me is nothing but that. It's just a sound. It's just a word. It's literally just It's just a sound. If you want to get real direct, like thoughts, word, it's just a sound.
So, Bob, you want to expand on it a little bit? No?
Not particularly.
Oh. Yeah, we've got to be really vigilant when he is kind of willing to speak, because it happens less and less. Today wasn't too bad, but on some meetings he doesn't really want to speak as much. So if anyone see that he opens his mouth, just point at him right away. So
I've used that silly analogy a couple of times in the group, and this is in relation to word or thoughts. If all of a sudden every single thought that started to manifest in your head was in Chinese, let's hope you don't speak Chinese, right? But if you didn't, it was just like everything all of a sudden was just in Chinese, okay? Including the so-called me that's supposedly sitting here, that's aware of, oh, everything's now in Chinese. That says everything now is in Chinese would also be said in Chinese. So where would the me exist if all of a sudden there was just nothing but Chinese language going on in here? Where would your me go? It would be completely gone. All you would hear, all that one would be aware of, is noise. Because there'd be no understanding of anything. There's not even a me here that still speaks English, right? That's understanding that now all the stuff that's going on in the head is Chinese. Because that me here that supposedly speaks English is also now in Chinese. Where does the me go then?
It couldn't be lost in thought.
It'd be pretty hard to get, you know, the closest you can get would be lost in sound, but you wouldn't have that much interest in it. Because there's absolutely no meaning, zip to it. Yet one would be quite present, quite here, quite now, quite here. And there'd just be that, and eventually, you know, what are you going to have more interest in? Noise that's going on in here that's in Chinese, you've got no idea what it means. You're just going to keep your attention focused on that, or eventually you're just going to move away from that, ignore that, and just come back to being here, present. What's going to be of more interest?
And if you take the metaphor right out of it, just sitting here like with the energies and how that's impacting, like sudden loud voices and not going into the thoughts about it. And so then if those thoughts that are going to come in are just converted to be, what's that in energy terms? If that just stays as energy, then you just stay with the energy. And the different impacts just there.
Yeah, good point, yeah.
It is. The whole me is based on word, a meaning. We give a sound a meaning and then we build a concept around that word. Literally, we built a big, huge concept around, like addiction was mentioned, and off we went. Huge, big story. Which was fine, but just to see what happens from one word, addiction. Whoa, up that comes, and everyone jumps in, and do you know what I mean? I mean, yeah, look, that's okay, but why not spend the time investigating me?
Though I find that those things that go off can't just be dismissed like that, because
I'm not dismissing them.
Often they're yeah, it sounds a bit like it though. I'm not saying you are, but it comes across like that.
In that as well.
I know.
Yeah, let her finish.
Just let me finish. I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying it comes across like that because of the words used. And so the point I'm just making is that often there'll be for different things. There'll be certain pointers that will take back to the space, or later on come back to the space. I'm not saying you don't think that. Just saying those words can sound a bit all-encompassing and can be taken that way.
And ultimately, that's how the energy in the room moves. So it is all okay.
Totally different patterns from different backgrounds.
Totally okay, including what just came out of my mouth.
I've got a concept for Bob.
Oh, go for it.
Bob, they say if you don't see through the personality, and the body, death occurs, that the personality survives death, and eventually finds another body.
Where were you before you came in?
where was I?
Yeah,
I
well,
went into manifestation
yeah,
while I was faceless and timeless.
yeah.
So that's the end of that concept.
But was there personality there?
Of course not.
No.
But if, you know, you see through the personality and you know you're not a personality, you're not, you know, the thoughts make up a personality, then obviously this manifestation disappears and what was never there, you know, was never there, it sort of disappears. But, you know, I've read that if the personality is still there and you still are identified with this personality, when the body dissolves, although they say the mind dissolves with it and all that sort of stuff, so...
Yeah.
That body goes now, where are those thoughts going to reside?
Well, they say they have their own energy, so it's sort of like an energy...
Yeah, well, they're all energy, but what happens to energy if it's not...
Well, it dissipates.
Yeah, dissipate.
Aren't your thoughts part of your body?
Pardon?
Are your thoughts part of your body?
Where are they? Any thoughts? If your thoughts were part of your body, your head would be that big you couldn't have room. We're all locked in the head, wouldn't they? You've got to go somewhere.
I've double tracked.
You need a few weeks.
No, the body is the vehicle through which thoughts, feelings, emotion, all those things, sight, sounds and all this pattern expressed through. In its totality, if it didn't form any of these patterns, there could be nothing. And with that silent stillness, emptiness, the space you create. But energy stirs, like they call Shiva Shakti. Shiva, the static aspect. Shakti, the consort, the dynamic. Shakti vibrates or dances and the world appears. That's that energy appearing through all the different pattern shapes and forms. But they're not solid, they're not substantial, not real.
But there is an aspect when he mentions, you know, there are certain patterns of thinking kind of likely to happen in this body, just the same way as behavior pattern. Like this particular body has a certain pattern of behaving towards cats, other people have different. Or certain predominant thoughts will be around, let's say, whatever, the issues are there. But it doesn't mean they kind of reside anywhere. It's just roughly the way the tendency in the connections is created. The tendencies in the body are part of the body.
So where do they actually come from? Where are they?
The whole universe contributes to your response patterns or behavior patterns. You could say even the parents of your parents, when your great-grandmother was in a womb and her mother, you know, like the whole universe, every single event created particular network of responses that is active right now. And moment to moment is being updated. It's really like alive. Like you may have particular response towards spiders, but it may change if your experiences are changing. And the response that you have now, it is because of the every nanosecond of the previous experiences. And again, this is including the time that you have created right now in this moment with all the past.
All we ever get is a photograph of the tip of the iceberg.
Good point. We only see the result.
It's like a tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, a sensation, a flashing image, whatever.
So it's a frequency then.
Yeah, so
ultimately.
not only
Frequency.
the tip, so it's the tip, objective tip. There's that entire history, and then this whatever flashes into this experience and this immediacy as recognised.
Yeah, okay.
It's just a facsimile of nothing in particular.
Yeah, this is what Nisargadatta was saying, that everything is spontaneous, which means uncaused. It means that everything has infinite amount of causes. Like there is no one single cause where why you just thought this thought and not the other. And you didn't think it just appeared. But there is no cause why this moment is the way it is. Not a single cause, but the whole universe, multitude of causes. So that's why you can't actually trace back the idea of karma or cause and effect.
Or not defined.
Or defined,
Or not defined, each
or
one
not.
is not definable.
Yeah, it's just spontaneous. That's why we say it's just spontaneous. It's completely untraceable. That's why it's no point worrying about it or speculating or thinking about it. It's just, as it is, easy. Or I don't know, I don't care. That's how it is, easy. But the knowing gives us false sense of security. Oh yeah, oh I understand it now, I feel safe. That's a false, very, very, very false sense of security. It's good to wake up from it. It's good to find comfort in, I don't know, I don't care. It's too complicated, don't worry about it. This, and then, I don't have to think about it. I don't have to worry about that. It's just this. Because the less of worrying and analyzing and thinking, the more of the groundedness in this moment, the more attention available for hearing, seeing, tasting, touching, smelling. You can't go wrong with just less analyzing, analyzing.
And that's going too far.
They say when someone, just referring to, is like when someone loses an arm, you know, there's this phantom feeling that they still have an arm. And there's that thought or pattern shaping that is referring to that personality.
Is it important to actually distinguish whether it is a thought or is it a pattern? Like, is it because it?
No,
the best way it would be if you actually give it your own name, because Bob can say, oh yeah, you know, in my vocabulary I think it's a thought. In my it would be maybe a emotion pattern. But it isn't really that important, is it? There is a phenomena.
The nervous system, like you know, like if you break, say your ankle when it's 10, there's still that pattern of pain.
You're giving credence to duration. That's all the so-called time is, duration. How long does this moment last? It's always spontaneous, fresh and new. And then what pain could you have, or what can anything have with duration? How lasting is it, unless it's got time? When do you begin? You can't negate the beingness right now. You say, right now I'm seemingly beginning, and even as you're saying that, it's ending. And the fresh beginning is.
So you gave it thought and it stayed there.
Or go back and recall it, what seemingly recall a memory or something like that.
Yeah, that's the beauty. Is there a past if you don't think about it? This actually reveals how the whole past history of evolution and childhood and everything is just a thought in this present moment. It's a complex sort of a picture. It's not just a single thought. It's
You've got the idea that there's duration going on in these bodies. But is it the same body? All those cells are dying in it right now and being replaced. It's changed, constantly transient. Everything else is transient. Time is duration and space is volume. Try and pinpoint the centre of space or the circumference to it. Because this conceptual idea that the world began billions of light years, where? Or how, or why? So you see, everything is beginningless, endless. It's just this spontaneous actuality, and you can't even say right now.
The question you asked earlier was really important, Tass, in relation to where are these thoughts and what are they and where are they coming from? You know? When we look at the world out here, this three-dimensional world out here, we see objects in space and so on, and then when if we actually pause for a moment and consider the stuff that does seem to go on, or was going to go in here, but we can't even say that. Like, is there a dimension where that we're aware of that thoughts appear in? If you actually look at it, it arises in nothing, and it's dimensionless. There's no depth in a thought, even an image that we may have that comes up. There's no depth in it. There's actually no dimension in it, and it arises in nothing. And we've just kind of come to accept that and not even really consider it, not even really look at that. Like, where is that? Can we actually place where thoughts are arising from or in? You know, like we say they're happening in my head. Really? Like, which bit? Like, what part of my head are they happening in? When you really look, they're not happening in a head at all, but they arise out of no-thingness, and it's dimensionless. There's actually no dimension in it, and that is our reality. That becomes our reality. This no-thingness, there's no dimension in it. There's no depth. There's not even real sound in there.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Isn't it amazing?
I like what Kat said before. It's almost like they're floating they're just particles.
Yeah.
And if I am latching onto them, then I'm creating a whole sequence and a whole universe, because I'm grabbing all these particles and putting them together to make up a supposed me.
Yeah.
And then don't care. They're just particles. Of course, they're just related to history and whatever and conditioning, but they're just floating.
And that's how that sixth sense, the thinking sense, operates. That's how it functions. The only problem is when we create a me that's in there as well. It's a beautiful instrument, the sixth sense, or the capacity to be able to think and create is magnificent. The problem is it creates a me as well. And that's when it becomes a problem. That's when it becomes a problem. It's the sixth sense. Seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, touching, thinking. It's literally the sixth sense where creativity happens. But what's contained in that, and it's kind of been happening for a long time, is this: it creates an idea or an image or the illusion of a me that's in there as well. And all those thoughts, everything just pops up spontaneously in that no spaceness, just keeps happening, including the idea of a me. It pops up in there as well. And some people get to see that, what's really going on there, and some don't. And it doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That's just that's what's happening in this room with these people, is we're for whatever reason, we're all looking at that me that also pops up in there. And there's a lot of people that aren't. And it doesn't matter whether you are or you're not. But this is what's happening here.
To me, it does matter.
Yeah.
To me, it definitely does. Yeah,
Sure.
to the
That's
me.
why you're here.
To
When
the
you latch
me.
on, you forget yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You go off into thought, and you're in all this, they did this, and I'm going to do that. And when you come out of it,
Thank you.
Pain and pleasure.
So don't forget yourself. Always realise that you are. And of course you'll go off into thoughts and imaginings, but it doesn't take away from the fact that you always are. And if you can stay with that you are, that feeling or whatever you can put to it, then you're in that open space always. And you can, things come and go, but you won't be, taken away by anger, or you won't be taken away by different sort of emotions and things. So that is always an empty space of awareness, and just to be aware all the time. But you've got to come back to it. If you get lost in it, which is quite natural, we forget ourselves as soon as someone says, remember yourself, It's like forgotten, you're off. So it's a thing, to me anyway, it's something you have to keep coming back to, recognising, as Bob would say, recognising, and be with it. Yeah, you'll know that it's a quiet, empty space that sees everything. That's my version of it.
Yeah, that's spot on. For people that are attracted to this, bloody matters intensely. The people that aren't attracted to this, doesn't matter at all. They're not even pondering it, not even looking at it. And that is okay. And this is okay. It's all okay. Just depends how everything or everyone is manifesting it at any given point in time. And we come in, and bloody oath it matters. It totally matters. This became my absolute primary attention. Absolute. And I pushed everything else aside. Like everything else aside. It mattered that much to me. But that's how I was manifesting, for it to matter that much.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't a me here that was mattering about it as such. That's just how...
There's no individuality there.
Yeah.
It's just is.
You want to say something, Bob?
And what's the opposite of matter? Spirit, isn't it?
Spirit.
Spirit. The subtle essence, and then it solidifies into matter. We call it a matter or material world.
Yeah, we had a conversation a few days ago with a lady from Germany who I had to translate to Polish language, and Bob was asking me to translate, "It doesn't matter." But you can't do it. In Polish language, we just don't have this sort of an idiom. But the way I would translate it, it means it has no importance. So really what we give matter or what we give importance somehow we become slave of it. Like whatever is important it is obviously for the person that it is important. Like if everything has equal importance or non-importance, nothing really stinks, everything is welcomed, everything is allowed, nothing is resisted. But the giving importance to something is the key. And when Terry mentioned that, the thoughts whatever the thoughts are appearing is just okay. They're okay, if they appear, it's okay. If they don't appear, it's okay. You could even have an insights into, looking from this perspective of that awareness of that sky and appreciate them. Like see what I mentioned before, the thoughts, the idea of thoughts, of images, mental images. What a wonderful channel of creativity. What a vast possibility for that ocean to wave into every single thought and image, into every single creature capable of having them. Now, if you are that life and you look at this capacity and you marvel at thoughts, you are totally amazed with thoughts because you don't really, if you are the sky, you marvel at clouds, they don't touch you. Or the sun, you are the sun and nothing touches you, you shine. But now if you construct, as Terry mentioned, you get that, because between the thoughts there is a thought of separate me, and that thought of separate me and relating everything to that little separate me. Now of course the clouds matter. Sun is invisible. Oh my God, there is no pleasure, there is no joy, there is no meaning, there is nonsense, there is nothing. Because I am here, I am that little me I believe myself to be. And there are clouds of thoughts that are completely making me mad. But you are not that me. You are the sky, you are the sun. The clouds, wow, yummy. They're not really touching you unless you believe to be a me. And that's where the investigation comes in place. That's where it is relevant. And the investigation is a thought. It has to occur to you to investigate.
And I like that way Terry phrased that, and the manifestation there, you said it better than that. The mattering was a great phrase, because you two both you talk about how devotion was such a thing that pushed everything else aside, and eventually that was just part of getting there as well. And whereas for me it's another one, like it's just... that's happening and the other stuff just isn't happening. It's happening a whole lot less, so it's more like the gentle path. But my mattering comes in like, how the fuck am I going to survive in this life with, not being able to receive resources, about being afraid I'm going to get bopped on the head every second, and, this is the clawing in of a whole bunch of stuff. But I think you've mentioned it before, it's around survival for me. It's not around non-duality or loss of a self or any of that. I don't care about dying to the self, none of that. It's just very neutral and relaxed in that area. But it's just these
Mattering.
different ways that it manifests, that mattering manifests. But yeah, mattering, it just happens to be in a bottom rung of the Laszlo scale for me, you know, it's just somewhere else. And I'm not going through those other rungs, I'm pretty damn sure. It's just, once that's gone, it clears the space, you know, it's nice.
Beauty.
Yeah, it's just...
It is. Yeah, we ran out of time. Yeah, that's the time to say thank you, everyone, for contributing, and please continue and contribute more. Share what's happening with you, and yeah, next time we have Tuesdays and Thursdays evenings and Sunday morning, just like today. And there is a possibility also to book Bob one-on-one anytime you want, through Skype or personally, and just hang out with him and have a little bit more of a personalized guidance, because especially for those who don't really want to spit out their soul in the public. And for me, it was a game changer. That one-on-one completely changed the game. It ended the game. It started the game. Yes, so you can talk to him. There is his phone number and Skype, and yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.